Late on a drizzly autumn evening when the glow of the city's neon signs scattered across wet asphalt, Alex sat quietly in his small studio apartment. He had worked late that night, grateful to finally return home for a moment of solace. Rain tapped on the glass as he sipped tea and thumbed through an old paperback novel, a ritual he often used to unwind. The peaceful hush of rainfall provided just enough background sound to lull him into a reflective state. Yet, in a single instant, his phone vibrated against the coffee table, and the comfortable atmosphere shifted. A message from an unfamiliar number appeared on the screen. "I'm watching you." At first, Alex assumed it was a wrong number or a tasteless joke. He pushed the phone aside, determined not to let it disrupt his evening. Moments later, it buzzed again. This time, the text carried a photograph, a snapshot of the very apartment building in which he lived, rain-slicked sidewalks glowing in the streetlights. The angle suggested someone stood at ground level, pointing a camera upward. Alarmed, Alex rose from his seat and inched toward the window. He peered through the blinds, taking in the quiet street below, but saw no one lurking there. Another vibration drew his attention. The new message read, "Don't bother looking. You won't see me." A deep sense of unease took hold. He considered contacting the authorities, yet he had so little information, just cryptic texts and a photo that proved nothing more than a vantage point. Instead, he typed a direct reply. "Who is this? What do you want?" The response came swiftly. "I want to play a game. Follow my instructions, and no harm will come to you." In that moment, Alex realized the sender was someone who aimed to provoke fear and control. Despite every instinct urging him to ignore the texts, he felt compelled to answer again, hoping to de-escalate whatever game this was. He asked what the instructions entailed. Another buzz delivered an address across the city and a single sentence: "Come alone, tell no one." With rising tension, he grabbed his coat from a hook near the door and slipped on boots that were still damp from earlier errands. Though uncertain whether to trust these ominous orders, he reasoned that in compliance, there might be a chance to resolve the situation. Venturing into the corridor, he noticed how the flickering overhead lights in the old building took on a foreboding quality. Once he stepped out onto the street, he found himself under a relentless drizzle that soaked through his jacket within minutes. Night had settled heavily over the city. Street corners were empty aside from a few straggling cars, tires hissing on the wet pavement. As he followed the route toward the designated address, the blocks turned gradually more industrial, lined with dilapidated warehouses and shuttered shops. Eventually, he came upon the abandoned site indicated by his phone's map. A single flickering spotlight illuminated a rusted metal door. The wind whistled through broken windows overhead, and distant thunder suggested an approaching storm. He paused by the entrance, steeling himself for what he might find inside. The door groaned on its hinges as he pushed it open, revealing a corridor of cracked concrete and dripping pipes. Dim overhead bulbs cast a sickly glow, just enough to make out narrow walkways and stacked crates along the walls. His phone vibrated once more. "Stop." He obeyed instantly, halting where he stood. A figure stepped into view, wearing dark clothing and a hood pulled low. When the figure spoke, the voice that echoed across the corridor was distorted, as though filtered through a mechanical device. You've done well to follow instructions, but the game has just begun. The figure's posture was calm, almost casual, as though it had all the time in the world. Alex fought the impulse to speak, waiting for a prompt or explanation, but none was forthcoming. He briefly wondered if he was dealing with a single individual or a group working together. Before any further words could be exchanged, the lights flickered and went out completely. Darkness enveloped the warehouse, wrapping every corridor in silent shadows. Alex tried to switch on his phone's flashlight, but the screen refused to respond, as if someone had tampered with the device remotely. The emptiness weighed on him, sharpened by the faint drip of water from corroded pipes. Then a whisper echoed through the blackness. "Remember, I'm always watching." The voice was near, yet impossible to pinpoint. Fragments of adrenaline sparked within him, but he kept himself as steady as he could, refusing to panic. Without warning, the warehouse lighting blinked back to life. Harsh fluorescence buzzed overhead, revealing that he stood alone once more. The hooded figure had vanished, leaving only a small package on the floor a few steps away. Drawn by grim curiosity, Alex approached the item. Opening the plain box, he discovered a single sheet of paper bearing the words, "This is your only warning. Next time, there will be no instructions." The finality of the note struck him. Realizing the situation could escalate, he tucked the message into his pocket and left the warehouse. Rain pelted him as he jogged along deserted streets back toward his apartment, each deserted intersection feeling more ominous than the last. By the time he arrived home, the sky had opened up in a stronger downpour. He locked the door and tested the deadbolt, half expecting his phone to light up again with fresh demands. Silence greeted him. Hours passed, yet no messages arrived. In the days that followed, he scrambled to regain a sense of normalcy. He switched phone plans, set up new privacy filters on social media, and installed additional locks. He even considered taking a trip out of town to distance himself from the unsettling event, but obligations at work kept him tethered to the city. Life settled into a semblance of routine, though every ring of the phone or suspicious noise near the front door put him on edge. At times, a passing car's headlights flared across his window, and he would wonder if someone was watching from the shadows. Co-workers noticed a subtle change in his demeanor, but he deflected their questions with vague excuses about being tired or overly busy. Late at night, he replayed the warehouse encounter in his mind, trying to recall if the distorted voice had any recognizable tone beneath the digital filter. He considered possibilities: a spurned acquaintance, a twisted internet troll, or an unknown predator who chose random targets. Despite the quiet that replaced the initial wave of terror, he remained aware that silence could be deceptive. The person behind those messages had delivered a chilling promise. Next time, there would be no instructions, no cryptic warnings, no second chance. He found himself double-checking every possible entry point in his home. Friends urged him to file a report, but he lacked tangible evidence beyond a few texts and a single note, fragments that hardly established a solvable case. As weeks slipped by, the sense of danger receded from immediate terror to an undercurrent of anxiety woven through daily life. He adapted to smaller habits, never leaving the curtains fully open, checking the peephole before unlocking the door, storing important files and documents somewhere secure. Occasionally, he scoured local news sources for clues of similar incidents. Nothing matched his experience, which left him further isolated in the knowledge that the hooded figure had targeted him specifically. Late one night, while scrolling through a streaming service for some distraction, he found his thoughts drifting back to the unanswered question. Why had the sender singled him out? The text messages and the ominous meetings suggested a personal motive or a carefully chosen victim. The aftermath, however, felt like an exercise in psychological control, where fear became an everyday companion. He was never truly able to shake the feeling that he was under invisible scrutiny, a pawn on an obscure chessboard. That sense of being observed tinted even the most ordinary moments, a routine trip to buy groceries or a casual lunch break among coworkers. Life went on, but each day carried the residue of that night's threat, as if his world was held together by a thin veneer of security that could shatter at any moment. Although no new messages arrived, he remembered the final whisper in the warehouse. Remember, I'm always watching. In its own quiet way, it had become a promise or a curse, echoing through the empty corners of his mind. Perhaps the unseen messenger had faded into the background, content to let apprehension gnaw at him from within. Or perhaps there was another plan in motion, one he would only discover when it was too late to stop it. The uncertainty became his constant companion, and he lived with the awareness that something else might surface. Despite changing phones and taking every safety measure he could think of, he realized no precaution could ever guarantee total security. The memory of that hooded silhouette in the warehouse, the cryptic texts, and the final note together formed a single menacing puzzle that would never quite leave him. Each evening, as raindrops drummed against the window, he could almost imagine a figure outside in the wet darkness, watching and waiting for the perfect moment to step out of the shadows and finish what had been started. He resolved to remain vigilant but refused to let this mysterious tormentor define his life. Over time, the weight of paranoia lessened just enough for him to smile again at small joys, an interesting conversation, a favorite meal, a mild sunrise over the city skyline. Yet that remote possibility of a follow-up encounter never wholly vanished. The next time the hooded figure made contact, Alex would have no illusions about the danger. He would stand on the brink, uncertain if the outcome would be survival or a final, chilling confrontation orchestrated by the unseen messenger who had chosen him on that rainy autumn night.